All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back for our Week 4 main slate review. Back with myself and Max Steinberg here to go over the Week 4 main slate contest, and we're actually going to mix it up a little bit today and look at some showdown contests as well. So should be a fun show here. Max, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Had another not great week, but I think theoretically I did well. So that's all that matters, right?
Well, we're going to start off the show by looking at the 555 milli here, and then we're going to jump into the Monday night showdown. So first off, just going to jump into contest flashback from the contest tab, go down to all contests. Just click on this first contest here and going to jump over. We're actually just going to start with the highest sim ROI lineups here. So let me just get this contest tab closed and pop these contests out. So sorting, descending by highest sim ROI. And Max, I'll let you take it away.
Well, I mean, I would say the immediate thing that stands out is there's 3 Baker Mayfield lineups. And, like we said before, when you have these really top heavy contests, and this one is 33% of first place, a lot of these best lineups are going to be these over-owned or these under-owned stacks that have a lot of leverage. And it looks like, Baker Mayfield at under 1% ownership. You could stack him with Mike Evans. You can stack him with Mike Evans and Rachaad White. You can stack him with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Rachaad White. And, this didn't work out that well, although Mike Evans did, I think, get injured during this game. Or actually, you know what? Aside from Mike Evans getting injured, it actually worked out great because Baker Mayfield had 24 actual points. So, it just says to me again, like finding these low-owned stacks is just really good for these top-heavy tournaments. I think if you scroll down a little more too, you see Mac Jones is another one that is there that had kind of fractional ownership, 0.2% ownership. Kirk Cousins, 3% ownership. It just seems like these are the types of lineups that SaberSim likes in these top heavy tournaments. So, and Andrew's having his washing machine go off as well. So I think that
I cannot believe you're picking up on that. That's so funny.
That ding is telling me, and that music is telling me that I'm onto something. Don't you think?
I'd say, a couple things standing out to me. One, I see a lot of big names here. Shady of Ice, Two Gun, another top player, Scout, Hishbu, right? And some of these names we've seen before with the Need Lunch Monies and the Red Coats. Just goes to show that, a solid process week in, week out. And these guys are, some of the top players for a reason, right? And I think going back to last week, we had a ton of skinny stacks, based around slate context and things like that. The prior 2 weeks, we saw a lot of these big stacks. And then now it seems like we're almost back to those big stacks, right? QB +2 with 2 run backs, QB +3 with 2 run backs, a single skinny stack, but with a run back, right? But a lot of these big correlated lineups showing up with very high sim ROIs once again here.
Yeah. One thing that's standing out as well, and I'm curious, could you look at the QB ownership overall? Because, what we're not seeing is 2 quarterbacks. One is Justin Herbert and the other is Aiden O'Connell, who were pretty popular, right? O'Connell came at a 14% exposure. And we're not seeing him at the top. And I think, when it comes down to it, these lower salary QBs can be tempting. And so he's someone that I got a lot and used a lot. But I think, if with his ownership getting steamed up like that, it turns out he might have ended up being a bad play given we're not seeing him at the top here. So maybe that is something to keep in mind for the future is, if you have a real low price QB that probably has a capped upside that actually is going to get some ownership, he might end up being a bad play. And I think kind of surprisingly, he got a lot of ownership and he certainly ended up being a bad play, at least from a theoretical standpoint.
I find that very interesting as well, because I think that, a lot of tools, a lot of other traditional optimizers are trying to solve this knapsack problem and pack in as many projected points as possible. And on a point per dollar basis, he's going to grade out so well. And then when we run these sims telling us like, hey, when we look at the sim ROIs, when we run these contest sims, this play is actually not that good of a play in this context. So I actually find that very interesting here.
Yeah. It makes me think as well. I've been thinking of this a little bit. I think it's important when you're building your lineups to make sure you're building plenty of lineups with a wide variety of QBs. I think going forward, I might actually cap my QB exposure when I'm building to around 10% for basically everyone, just because I want to get viable lineups for all these quarterbacks and just see then what the simulations are favoring. Because if you end up getting like 20 or 30% of your quarterback in your pool, then you just might leave out some lineups that are really good. Because I think for me, I end up getting 20% Aiden O'Connell in my pool. And I think I wish in hindsight that I had a bigger spread in my pool so I could have uncovered some of those, lower owned QBs that clearly ended up being very, very good.
So then I guess like to play devil's advocate a little bit, isn't that like directly why some of these like best QB plays, don't get that steam that we've talked about in previous weeks? How I feel like we've kind of said like, hey,
right.
The best quarterbacks just aren't getting the ownership. Well, it almost seems like a lot of people are thinking that way, right? So how do you find that balance?
No, I mean, you definitely have to find a balance. I think it's more, I think when in this specific instance, just talking about O'Connell, it's sort of like the value trap with QB. Like, he's just kind of a value trap. And it seems like in some cases, when you have a really high upside QB, like Justin Herbert or Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts, and I don't remember exactly, but it seems like in past slates, those QBs might be chalky or Kirk Cousins or something, and they end up being good. And those are QBs that have real clear upside. But, there's some of these QBs that are just not going to have upside. I think Aiden O'Connell, I think Zach Wilson maybe next week is going to be a play like this where people, because they're facing the Broncos who've been terrible, people are kind of going to gravitate towards him and be like, Zach Wilson, this matchup's really good. But he probably is a guy like Aiden O'Connell too, who just maybe the upside really is not there. So it's just something to keep in mind with that. I think talking about building, I mean, it's just sort of like, if you build 5,000 lineups and you cap a quarterback at 10%, that's still 500 lineups per quarterback. So I'm just totally happy with doing that. I was just thinking, hey, I want to have like 100 lineups with Baker Mayfield just so, a few of those lineups, if they're good that I might have missed, and that if I didn't do that, I want to just see if they're good. Maybe you can do it as a test build as well, just like build with a wide variety of QBs and see what the contest sim is favoring and then go back and change things around, right? It's just making me think about like curating your pool in the most optimal way. I think is going to be really helpful. So something that I'm just keeping in mind.
I think that's an important distinction, kind of. Maybe I wasn't picking up on your idea clearly the first time, but it sounds like what you're talking about is setting these build parameters pre-build, to get the spread that you're looking for, but then, maybe resetting that after the lineups are built and then figuring out, what players you may or may not want to have more or less than that amount going actually into the lineups that you're taking with you into your contests. Is that the right interpretation?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess I'm just not hammering the point enough as well. So I'm just seeing, like Baker Mayfield and Mac Jones. I don't know if either of those players were even getting into my pool, right? Because they don't project very well, but when the ownership is that low, right, they end up being pretty good plays. So I was just thinking, okay, how can I get more of this into my pool so I don't miss this opportunity in future weeks? And I think in that case, it might make sense to sort of like split up QBs in your pool. But then when you actually choose your lineups, you can take some stance on QBs, but just make sure you're not missing anything by just like not building any lineups with a particular QB.
Got it. I think that makes a lot of sense. Something I haven't heard too many people doing, like in the community, like, hey, I put these parameters in place to build a spread out pool, and then I basically get rid of them in the post build, and then set my number of lineups, and then figure out what subset of those, one, I need, and then two, that I want to take with me into my contest. So I think that is almost a way of maximizing diversity of your pool before you even get to contest sims, before you even get to min uniques or anything like that, etc. So really good idea there that I gonna be an actionable takeaway for me when we wrap up here.
Awesome. You want to look at users?
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to call out really quickly. This change went live last week, but the ownership that you see for the players in the actual lineups that are being shown is their contest ownership. So in previous weeks when we did this was actually their projected ownership, but we are now displaying the actual ownership for each player in the lineups that you see. So we can see that, Josh Allen came in at 6.9% owned in the contest, and then that is reflected in the lineups tab as well. So one thing that I did want to call out here that is a upgrade. And then just before we move on, I did like your point about, QBs with upside with low ownership that you might want to get to more, as opposed to these like value trap QBs where their upside is capped. I kind of equate that to, maybe a rookie pitcher coming up for MLB and who has, a really low salary, but a good game for this guy in his first start might be, 5 scoreless innings, right? But then you equate that to like Max Scherzer, where, he always has the potential to go the full distance and throw the full 9 innings. So understanding where value is capped, where upside is capped is something that I think that, maybe doesn't get talked about enough when looking at these point per dollar plays.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, in the same way with football, the coaches are going to limit these guys, and that's not good for your lineup. So,
right. Okay. Well, we're going to hop over to users, and we are going to look at our 150 max users here. And we are going to just filter for them and then sort by highest sim ROI and look at the best portfolio on average here. So looks like that was a name that should be familiar to most people in the DFS community. Whistles go woo here. So let's pull up his lineups. Do you want to start with his exposures, or you want to go straight to his lineups?
Let's look at player exposures.
Sounds great.
So QB, again, it seems like these top players like to spread it around.
Sorry.
This is very interesting. So, I mean, you did QB and you said all. He didn't have exposure to anyone more than 33%. So that just goes to show you, like, you don't have to go ham on one play to have a good portfolio of lineups. He had the best theoretical ROI out of anyone, and he really spread it around quite a bit. I'm curious what stack, if you'd look at stack exposure as well,
of course,
would be interesting. And so he had no QB +3, a lot of QB +2, and a lot of QB +2 with a bring back. So it's
a lot of bring backs, pretty much.
Yeah, that's true. I would say more of a traditional build structure. It seems like sort of like, if you look at this, it's sort of like just solid play out all around. He's not like taking any huge stands. He's just trusting the fact that he can build 150 really solid lineups and he's not making mistakes. And, there's different playing styles that different players use, right? There's a guy, I Need Lunch Money, who is just very contrarian. He takes big stands. He likes fading the chalk and does really well. It seems like Whistles Go Woo does a very different strategy where and it's not like he's not doing anything interesting, right? It's like, he had leverage on Miles Sanders. He was sort of under on Keenan Allen. He's sort of under on not that many people, but he's over on James Cook, and he is taking some stands. They're just not huge stands, and he's creating good stacks and just playing as best possible. And hey, he just created really solid lineups, and it ended up with a really solid ROI.
I think something that really stands out to me here is that, these top 3 exposures, these guys are all really chalky, right? 29% owned, 41% owned, 31% owned. And this is like something we were talking about on office hours today, is that, when you have these chalky pieces, sometimes if you're, I'm not saying, this is what Whistles is doing, but like sometimes if you're not sure, like how you feel about the play, or, it feels like a lot of ownership, sometimes the best thing to do is just match ownership and basically say that, okay, if this guy goes off, I have, on average as many shares as other users, or if they do bad, I have as many lineups sunk as other users, and get leverage elsewhere, right? So being close to ownership is the most neutral thing you can do, and figuring out how to get leverage elsewhere, right? The Miles Sanders at 7%, the James Cook, like you called out, the Rashad White, right? Some of these lower owned running backs with a lot of upside, picking his spots away from those pieces and trying to get leverage elsewhere is what really stands out to me.
Yeah. And, my guess is he's a player who is confident in his projections and is just happy sort of just, perfecting those and taking the approach of trying not to make any mistakes. And clearly, I don't know what his bottom lineup in terms of sim ROI is, but my guess is basically he just has, he probably just doesn't have a lot of mistakes, right? It's like his worst sim ROI lineup is negative 21%. And that's SaberSim's judgment, right? Like given his projections that he probably believes that's a positive lineup, and it might be, but he just straight up made 0 mistakes in an 150 lineup set. So that's very, very impressive to me.
Yeah, I mean, going to his third, look at these jumps. Negative 21% is his worst, right? But then negative 16, negative 10. Like these lineups jump very much like closer to, they get closer and closer to positive sim ROI very fast. And, looks like I was actually 1 row down. But still, I think that
still, it's
not a lot of these lineups are going to be coming in as very negative sim ROI by our own metrics, right? By our raw projections, and I'm sure he has his own, like you said.
Yeah, I guess one last thing to look at, I'm just noticing, it seems like he possibly didn't use the Eagles defense. Would you mind looking at defenses? It's there's a lot of people who think that basically defense is impossible to predict, and therefore, I know he did use Eagles D, but he's using a wide array of defenses, and he's focusing on low salary. And it just goes to show, like, it's defense doesn't have to be complicated. You really do not have to go ham on any one defense, and, spreading it out, it can be totally fine. It can be kind of random. And, there's probably not that much of a difference in ROI between using the chalkiest defense and the least chalky defense. So I think that makes sense.
All right. Well, if you're good, I'm going to jump over to the Monday Night Showdown.
Yeah, let's do it. So this is cool. So we're finally processing some of the bigger contests. And so there was a millionaire maker last night in Seattle, New York. So we're probably just going to do the same process, is look at some of the highest sim ROI lineups and then see who made some really good ROI lineups out of the 150 maxers. So
Going to jump over here just about there. So this was the $20 150 max.
Yeah. Might take a little time to process because it's a lot of entries. Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Still moving pretty quick here.
Yeah.
So let's go to sim ROI. And then we're sorting highest to lowest here. So go ahead.
Yeah. So, one thing that you're just going to notice off the bat is there's a huge key here, which is the dupes number in the bottom right of these lineups. When they say 0, it means they're not duplicated. And that's really good because that means that you have a solo shot at the milli. And not surprisingly, if you can get these lineups, they have very, very high ROIs, especially if they're legitimately lineups that can win, right? So It's interesting just to look at this. I mean, I haven't looked at these yet, but not having a dupe comes down to basically two factors. One is the product ownership of the lineup, and two is the salary of the lineup. And so with most of these, what you're going to see is quite a bit of salary is left on the table. And the product ownership, although we don't have it up, is pretty low, although, it's actually not that low. And one key to product ownership as well is, when you're multiplying two numbers, having one number that's very small can help you a lot. So having multiple single digit ownership is going to help these product ownerships a lot. And then also, which is a last point I want to make, is that there's variance in whether your lineup is duplicated or not, right? You can't totally predict that someone else is not going to use your same process and then come up with a lineup in the same way you did. There's some randomness there, right? So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm sure some of these guys accidentally had a lineup duplicated when they thought it wasn't going to be. That left a lot of salary on the table. But yeah, I mean, the only thing that stands out to me is what's interesting is, these lineups all kind of look good to me. They don't look like so insane that they couldn't possibly work out. And, they're leaving 3,000 salary on the table, 4,000 salary, 5,000 salary. It's not that bad, but, when you're building your lineups and you're trying to optimize for this millionaire maker, you really got to optimize for unique lineups more aggressively than you think. So anything that stands out to you, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I was just kind of scrolling here as you were talking. And one thing that, I was just looking for, I mean, we're through the top 25 sim ROI lineups, and none of these are duplicated even a single time, right? So that just tells me how important it really is that, you're playing unique lineups, right? I think that, that there is always this discussion in the DFS space about, okay, you want lineups with a good chance of winning that, maybe you're under 5 dupes and you sacrifice some, win probability for less duplication, but you still want to get to some of these lineups that have a better chance of winning. The Sims are telling us like, hey, kind of optimize for uniques is the best way to go, at least like from what I'm seeing here right away. What is your thoughts on, that style of play? I think that, most people, if you could play this slate out, or I guess a better way to put it is that if you had, an infinite bankroll and an infinite number of slates to play, then yes, optimizing for these unique lineups seems like the best play. But obviously most of us are not playing within those bounds or playing that many slates. What is your thoughts on what the Sims are saying versus kind of the more practical side of DFS and bankroll management and things like that?
Yeah, well, I think this is actually a great question. Let's go to users, because we can actually look at the lineups that I made for this contest, because I was not as aggressive with salary, but you can see that my ROI actually was very, very good, right? And so if you scroll to the right, Andrew,
on this page,
yeah, exactly.
Okay,
you can see average dupes and unique lineups. So for me, I was doing something where my max salary level was 48.5, so 1,500 off the maximum. And I had some product ownership restrictions, and I was basically winnowing my pool of 5,000 lineups down to about 300, and messing with things from there. And you can see that I had 20 unique lineups and my average dupe was 10. But my ROI is still very, very high. So I think it's possible. And maybe we can let's look at some of my lineups and just see if some of these lineups that are like 10 dupe or 20 dupe, or sort of what's the magic number here. It seems like it's not. Oh, there we go.
Just took a second.
Yeah, why don't we look at the worst lineups that I made and see where I went wrong? Because
so one thing here is that we are looking currently only pulling in the top 20,000 lineups from the contest.
I see. Okay.
So these are your bottom 11 lineups within that 20,000. So they're still going to be pretty highly ranked.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. That's interesting. I mean, well, let's look at the top ones again, because it seemed like being duped once or twice was like fine, right? Because it's like, look, I have a lineup that's duped once and the ROI is actually huge, and it's duped twice and the ROI is still big. So it seems like, my takeaway is I actually cost myself from not being more aggressive, because it seems like, well, actually, no. Yeah. It seems like I cost myself because
kind of that jump from like 5 to like closer to 10 seems like the biggest discrepancy.
But then the issue is as well as, there's only so many viable lineups you can make, right? That take that much salary off the table. So, if you're filtering enough, and something that I do that's really important in Showdown is I filter by the lineups have to be over 0% ROI. And therefore I make sure that at least theoretically for a theoretical contest, they're not going to be negative EV. I'm still going to get negative EV lineups, but because, ownerships are going to be different. But, when I winnow them down, even with like pretty loose restrictions, that 5,000 goes down to a few lineups really quick. So, the other thing that says to me is like, hey, you can probably do way better in these contests making 20 lineups rather than 150. It's probably really hard to just 150 max this profitably, but it's probably very easy to 20 max this profitably, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Obviously, I have a thirst for the million since I won this before, but I think in general, that 150 lineups, it's like they let you do that, but that doesn't mean you actually want to do that. So that's something that I'm thinking about as well.
One thing that I heard you kind of talking about process related. So just a question, share as much as you like. So it sounded like you are taking your pool of 5,000 and then you said you're trying to get that down to about 300, mostly through filtering for positive ROI, mostly through, either salary restrictions or, product ownership or something like that. So, did I understand you correctly? Like
that's exactly right. Really? Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Cause I guess something that, I've talked about in the past, I've heard Jordan talk about in the past is using these filters to kind of trim your pool, but being cautious about being, I would guess, too aggressive. Like something I've said is like, hey, if you apply a filter and it takes you from 5,000 lineups to 2,000 lineups, maybe you're setting too aggressive or of a filter, or maybe you should be wary of the results that you get on the other side. Mostly kind of with like a geomean filter. I feel like the builder is going to say, okay, you want low geomean lineups. Here are a bunch of low salary captains, right? And if you're not going through with like that second round of verification, that you might end up with some plays that you may not have wanted to play in the first place. So what do you think about that?
So I would just say this is just very specifically for the millionaire maker, a Sunday millionaire maker or Monday millionaire maker with like 50% of the prize pool to first, right? It's like just, and it's interesting because, there's a lot of different Showdown contests, right? This one has a very different strategy than something with 7,000 entrants, right? And so, in this case, I am, if I'm doing a main slate, I don't want to filter like that. But if I'm doing a Showdown slate where I'm just trying to get unduped lineups, I'm going to filter down as much as I possibly can to make sure that I'm getting at least quite a few lineups that hopefully have a good shot at not being duped, because as we can see, like having 1 dupe, 2 dupe, 0 dupe lineups, they're just going to be the most profitable lineups, especially if they're viable. And you can see by these lineups, right? It's like, all of these are easily like these don't seem like out of the question lineups. And I like Darius Slayton quite a bit on the slate. It didn't work out, but you know, that's just like my own take. But yeah, I mean, it's like you if you can get a lineup that, you know, could solo win and actually has a shot to win, then that's pretty good. I mean, the shot to win is very low, right? Like you can see the win rates of these lineups, it's like 0.03%. It's not high, right? But you know, that's the point of these contests, is you're just taking a shot. You don't want to like risk a lot of your bankroll in these contests. But you know, I think if you're watching this video and you just sort of avoid these contests, you know, you can probably make 5 really good lineups for these contests that have really high ROIs. You know, they're still like lottery tickets, but you know, they're pretty good ones. So, you know, if I was a more low stakes player, I probably would be taking shots at this contest, making just a few lineups, because you can pretty easily make them really high ROI lineups.
I think that's very well said. I'm sure some people in the community will appreciate that take a little bit. But from there, you know, after looking at the we actually looked at your portfolio first. Did you want to look at the maxer who had the highest sim ROI here?
Why don't we just look at the users who maxed out, who had some of the highest sim ROI guys? Because I think that would just be interesting to see, you know, what were their strategies? What did they just go ham trying not to dupe, or did they? So could you just scroll to the right? We don't even have to look at their lineups. I just want to sort of look at their page, right? So you can see, well, Shady Advice was like me, who he didn't try to go too insane, and made some really profitable lineups. There's guys like Hishbu and Osimo who really seem to just go for it. And there's sort of people in between. So it's interesting. I mean, it does seem like, you know, there's a variety of ways to do this.
I would say, you know, looking at the top 10-ish players here, everybody staying, you know, highest was average 11 dupes, but everybody staying, you know, around or below 10 with at least somewhere. I mean, I actually find Scout and Shady Advice pretty interesting here, just because one, they have the, you know, out of these players up to Emily Heskey here, the first and third highest average dupes, and then they had the 2 lowest number of unique lineups, yet they're third and fourth in sim ROI here.
Right, but you can
that's
look
an interesting
that
combination.
If you look at average score, though, you know, they're not sacrificing as much projection, right? Whereas you look at Osimo, he had to really sacrifice projection in order to get that. So you can see sort of like why this is the case. You know, if you're trying to get a bunch of unique lineups, you're going to have to put some crappy lineups in there, right? And so it depends on your risk tolerance. Like, I'd wonder, you know, maybe the guy like Scout or Shady or me or even Chipotle Addict, like this strategy might just be better because it's just sort of like, hey, you're not going to lose your ass as much. And, you know, you might not solo win as much, but it still seems like it's very profitable. But again, I think my guess is probably for all of us who are 150 maxing this, when you get to that like 100th plus lineup, my guess is it's not very good. I think there's just only so many lineups you can make. So, you know, I think it's an interesting spot for someone who is like, hey, I don't care to put in 150. Let me just put in 3. And you'd probably pretty easily beat guys like us.
I actually think this screen is very, very interesting. I feel like, you know, comparing to the classic, like you can learn a lot more from just this user screen kind of in Showdown, just analyzing some of these average scores, unique lineups, average dupes, then you would be able to write for a classic slate, because this is just a lot more telling about the player's portfolio and how they get to these positive sim ROIs. So don't have to do, I'd say, as much of like the in-depth lineup review, but can you know, take a glance at this and get some more ideas on average.
Yeah. I guess the last thing is, if you look at Whistles Go Woo, who had the highest ROI in the main slate, he kind of seems to go with, if you look at this, because he has 42 unique lineups, but he has a 12 average dupe. So that says to me that he sort of is like, okay, I'm going to try to make like half lineups that I think are going to be unique. And then half of them are just going to be like stone optimals, and that's interesting too, right? Like some of these lineups that are pretty optimal can be good, right? Especially if they're not duped like 300 times. If you have a lineup where you're like, hey, I actually just like really like a few players who possibly are just not going to get enough ownership, then that lineup can be good. So I think you don't have to go all or nothing either. You can try to go for some unique lineups and try to go for some just really good lineups that you think might be under-owned.
So many different ways to win. It's fun to talk about. And really quickly, just for anybody not aware, we did release this new feature with our most recent update favorites here. And Showdown is like probably the best place for this, where you can have, say you're 150 maxing, right? You could have multiple builds open. You could build 75 lineups with, one game script or one game plan, right? Maybe you go the unique approach in these 75, and then you take your build too, and you do something where you care less maybe about the product ownership. And then you can send both of those 75 lineups to your favorites tab and fill your contest from there. So if that's like an approach that you guys are watching this video and saying, hey, I would actually like to split up my lineups into two very unique sets, you can do that right here in the SaberSim app. And I just wanted to call that out for anybody maybe not familiar with that tool.
Cool.
But Max, you want to give us your final takeaways?
I mean, it was interesting looking at this in Showdown. I think, first of all, the ROIs in Showdown, they're really high. So, and these millionaire makers. So obviously you're not going to realize that very quickly, right? A lot of it's going to be realized when you win, which doesn't happen very often. But, if you're reverse to these contests, I think they really are like pretty, just view them as like a kind of profitable lottery ticket. It's like you can make like a good lineup that has a good shot at winning something. And if you really look at contests and try to get good at some of the smaller contests and sort of optimizing for those, there could be a lot of money in it. And then for the main slate, just as always, it just, you get those low end stacks that can actually have some upside, and they always, always, always do really well in our simulator. And so, in your build process for week 5 or week 6 or whenever you next play, try to, make sure that your lineup pool has a wide variety of QBs, so that our contest sim, or that if you don't subscribe to Ultimate and you're just on Pro, so you can just sort of, pick out some of those quarterbacks and some of those stacks that might get really low ownership and make sure they get into your lineup. So those are my takeaways.
I'd say for, this Showdown stuff, I'd say that, if you're playing less than 150 max, right, trying to build, 5 unique lineups that, pass the eye test, look like they have a really good shot of winning is, if you're playing like less than the max, basically, I'm just going to try and build like the most unique lineups I can that I think have a shot of winning. And then even, you can take these same approach and apply it to the mini max if you want, right? The 50 cent 150 max, finding a balance, maybe splitting up that build, doing a very unique set of a subset of your 150, and then doing something a little bit different for the rest of your portfolio is something that I'm going to think about a lot. And then getting back to the main slate, I would say that, we saw the similar trends with the quarterbacks being very low owned across the board. I think that, that value trap that we kind of talked about is something that I'm going to think about a lot in future weeks, about players with capped upsides, and maybe if they're getting steamed, that ownership is getting driven up, trying to stay away from those plays and look for those players with higher upsides with lesser ownerships is the way I feel like I would like to go.
Cool.
But appreciate everybody tuning in here. We will be right back next week. As always, Max, enjoy chopping it up with you, man, and look forward to talking soon.
Thanks, Andrew.
See you guys.